in the spirit of the new streamlined coffee morning, so we won't delay. It's very nice to see you all here this morning, and really nice to welcome Ainhoa Gonzalez and Lyn Hagin Meade, who are working together now on the Community SDG Dashboard project that's supported as an Earth Institute strategic priority project. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what they have to say. So I'll hand over to them.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Tess. And thank you all for making the time to attend the coffee morning this morning. I'm just going to start sharing the slides, if that's all right. Just to set the context. Everybody can see that, yeah? Okay, so good morning again. My name is Ainhoa Gonzalez, and I'm an associate professor in the School of Geography. And I suppose I'm leading this project on measuring sustainable action at a community level, which is funded by the Earth Institute Strategic Priority Mechanism. Now, the project is a collaboration between a number of UCD schools and Dundrum 2030, which is a community group. And Lyn Hagin Meade is with me here today. She's the chair of this community group, and she's going to very quickly outline the mission and vision of Dundrum 2030.
Great, thank you, Ainhoa, and hello everyone. Thank you for inviting us here today. So Dundrum 2030 started in 2019 as a community-led venture, and we wanted to create a forum to help the community to interact and to match with initiatives that were going on. So we saw an interest was already there through the things we were involved in, and we wanted to bring it wider. And we aimed to be a facilitator and connect small individual projects to other projects that were going on, and in that way build the capacity of the local area. So we had a four-part mission. The first was to find a framework, and the SDGs really were the right framework for us. The second was to build a network, and that's an ongoing process of trying to interact with as many groups in the area and residents and businesses. The third was to track our progress, and that's why we're gathered here today. This is one of the big initiatives that we were interested in and talked to UCD about. And finally, to provide education and outreach and workshops to facilitate the community capacity building. Thank you.
Thank you, Lyn. So the project basically kind of derived from a conversation between Lyn and myself when looking at how we could support and monitoring of the initiatives, sustainability initiatives they had in the community and their progress or their contribution towards the achievement of the SDGs, and how perhaps could geographic information systems or GIS could help gather, manage, and visualize the data to support this monitoring process. Having developed GIS-based decision support tools and also taking into account the voluntary monitoring that is going on by a national level by the OSI and the government on sort of mapping the progress on SDG indicators, I very quickly saw the opportunity there to develop a tool. Apologies, I don't know how that happened. My phone, this is a COVID moment, sorry. So I saw the opportunity to blend the two and basically developed a GIS-based support tool that will enable visualizing the data and helping the community monitor progress and have a visual way of monitoring it. And for the discussions with the project team, with the likes of Enda and Shane and Toby, we also looked at the opportunity, or we kind of realize of the opportunity that this provided to examine how national metrics will work at local level, and indeed how local data could start feeding a national level of fill perhaps some of the existing data gaps and replace the use of proxies, which is done at the moment. And as well as explore other indicators that perhaps might need to be recorded going forward. And on that note, mentioned that Cynthia Mahoney has come on board. She's a master's student, and she should be doing a little project on the Dundrum area, how cycling contributes to various SDGs. And as you might not be aware, but cycling metrics cycling indicators are not included in the list of indicators to monitor progress towards sustainability. So it's one of those things that, we identify already a data gap, and Cynthia is going to try to fill it through her research. So basically what we're trying to do is bring in the national data to a local level through the means of GIS, and basically then use local data, collect local data to see whether we can actually complete a more detailed picture on national level by filling gaps, by trying to see how things match up from national to local, and basically informing national initiatives towards the monitoring of the SDGs. So in terms of the project and what we set out to do for the next 16 months, there's two key, I suppose, elements in the project. One is to build the capacity of the local community in becoming more familiar with the 231 UN indicators, unique indicators that assist to sort of monitor progress for the 17 SDGs that we have. Capacitate them also in the use of the likes of GIS or GPS devices, or even phone, just collecting coordinates to their phones to help gather data and information to feed into this monitoring process. And the second aim, which both of them run in parallel, hand in hand, obviously, is to create an indicator-led monitoring toolkit, which is basically a GIS-based online dashboard. And these will be supplemented, obviously, with user manuals and things like that to make it, I suppose, reachable to the wider community, and it will facilitate overcoming some of the technical barriers that currently exist with the use of GIS or technical spatial data. So that's what we're trying to break all these barriers and provide something that is user-friendly, that allows us to collect data at the moment and visualize it and manage it, but also sets the foundation for the community going forward. So basically, the project will set up a 2020 or perhaps a 2021 baseline of what Dundrum 2030 is doing. And the idea is that this platform allows the community to keep populating that data over time and to monitor the progress on sustainability themselves, so between now and 2030. Also mention, I suppose, at this point, that Dundrum serves as a testbed. So the intention of this project is to generate something that could possibly be transferred to other communities looking at similar initiatives. So eventually we can have a network of communities looking at measuring indicators, UN aligned indicators, and feeding for national inventories. We could have a much more fine-grained data, a much more clear picture of what's happening on the ground, because at the end of the day, sustainability happens much at the ground level where projects are implemented. One of the things I want to highlight as well, that even though it might be seen like the because of the title of the project, the main output of the project is the dashboard. The main outcome is just a GIS-based portal, I suppose, for monitoring sustainability in the Dundrum area. The project goes beyond that, and the underlying objectives are basically those of co-creation. So it's very much a community, a bottom-up driven project, community engagement, building the capacity of communities, and obviously engaging communities meaningfully into sustainability initiatives. As you might know, and as mentioned earlier, so we have 17 SDGs and 231 UN aligned unique indicators. The project cannot measure them all. And indeed, we want, because it's bottom up, we want to tailor it to the needs of the community. So the Dundrum 2030 group have already identified the SDGs that they want to focus on. And these are very much based on the initiatives they currently have in the area. And I'll pass on to Lyn now again, because she'll give us an outline of what's happening at ground level, what kind of projects they're running at the moment.
Great. So just to say to begin that our first initiatives are very much ones that are capitalising on what's already taking place and helping more of the community to become involved in those projects. So the first one we have there, Sustainable Energy Communities. We've been working on this for the last year. We have a mentor from the SEAI and DLR, and we are in phase one. We're helping residents, associations and businesses who want to get involved to facilitate them to become involved in that SEC creation. With the food waste pilot program, we're working with Airfield Estate, and we are working with residents to help them to reduce their food waste through workshops and education. The Air Pollution and Mobility Share monitoring with We Count will help to engage the community in a large-scale citizen science. And this is a good way in for the community just to see what we're doing right now on the ground and how our community is. The Wildlife Corridor Plan and Biodiversity Plan is one that DLR are launching early next year. And we've been talking with them about creating another program, citizen program in the Dundrum area, where the biodiversity can be sort of fanned out in tendrils so that more of the community can get involved in wildlife creation through their own gardens and through a single initiative. The Tree Amigos is a local initiative working with the Parks Department to engage children in tree mapping and identification so that they can build a sort of picture of the residential areas in which they live. And the cycling project, Ainhoa has already mentioned there.
Thank you, Lyn. So to finish up, just very quickly give you an overview of where we are at and where we going. So the project team has met a number of times at this stage. It was only launched last month, by the way. So we're in the very early stages of the project, but we already come together a couple of times. And as I mentioned, we're aware of the initiatives in the local community. We now have a clear focus on the SDGs, and we have identified a set of preliminary UN-aligned indicators to link to those SDGs and to link to the initiatives that Lyn just mentioned. So the next stage on this is to actually engage further with the community and agree on those sets of indicators that are going to be taken forward in the project, and that obviously eventually will feed into the dashboard. Once we've agreed on the indicators, data gathering will start. So this will be a combination, as I mentioned, of existing data. So we aiming to target governmental agencies and other data collectors to see whether there is sufficient fine-grained detail for the Dundrum area to give us a more detailed picture of what's happening for those indicators at the local level. And when we identify data gaps, we'll go and collect data on the ground. And we have Shane McGuinness, who's present here today. He's the postdoc in the project, so he's going to be leading a lot of this work within the project. Mention also that we have limited resources and time as part of the project, so we have to be realistic as to what we can gather, and that's why we're liaising with people like Francesco and the We Count project to collect information or data on traffic counts, on air quality and things like that. So we're starting to build a bit of a network to see where we can get, what other data sources could basically feed into the project. And then we liaise with local volunteers as well, insofar as possible, given current times, to help us gather some of the data that is needed to fill some of the data gaps. And the final project, as I mentioned, is that a dashboard. What you see down there is just a mock-up. It won't look like that, but just to give you an idea, so it'll be a GIS-based platform where we're going to map the indicators, and through pie charts and other graphs, you'll be able to see progress over time for those indicators. So that's all from us. We'll be more than happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Ainhoa and Lyn. That was really interesting. I was curious, Lyn, about how Dundrum 2030 initially came together, what motivated the group to start sort of talking, and why they focused in the end on SDGs as your kind of structuring framework, if you like. You said you thought around it for a while, and that was the one you settled on.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So very early on, there was a public meeting held in 2019 about sustainability in the community, and it was a cold evening with rain. It was like winter time, and over 200 people turned up in the Goat Grill for a public meeting, which was kind of unheard of. And a number of us started to have a conversation at the end of that, saying, what can we do? What can we do? And we met over the coming months and into the summer, really trying to figure out how we could make something tangible. And at that point, we started to look at the SDGs. So we were trying to think of something that was beyond working specifically on the environment, but that actually would engage a wider part of the community. So looking at both economics and the community aspect of social interaction that would help to enhance the whole environmental aim as well.
Any other questions that anyone would like to ask?
I'm happy to ask a few questions.
Please, yeah.
Yeah. So I really like the project. I've just got two things. So the first one is, you probably are aware that GeoHive, the Central Statistics Office, have this GeoHive portal, and I think it is more aggregate than you. I presume it's at two nuts or something, like a quite a more aggregate level than looking at Dundrum in terms of their regional data. But they do have a tool in there, kind of storytelling. That could be interesting to work with them and pop, because it's done through the Central Statistics Office. So I think it'd be kind of a nice story tool. And it's more quantitative, obviously, because you're going even further than a story. You're obviously using the 234 indicators and you're populating them. So it's a dashboard, you know what I mean? So it's more than a story. But I think it's worth coordinating with them. And particularly if you want to bring it to scale, you wouldn't know, maybe working with them, you can bring other communities in as a project or something. My second question, though, is in terms of, like, I understand the data revolution and the whole idea of community and bottom-up approaches to populating data, but how do you standardize this or prevent it from being, hacked, or people putting in false data, or like what sort of processes, like how do you validate this data, really? That's what I'm trying to say. And how do we feel confident that this is good data?
Thanks, Paul. Very good question, that last one. But in terms of the first observation, mentioned that we're aware of the GeoHive, the Ordnance Surveys Initiative, which is part of the voluntary review of the SDGs and how they populated and created that. But we want to take that to the local level, because a lot of the data is national, or the further they go is at a small area administrative level. We're going to have issues there when it comes to the fine-grained detail because of GDPR. So, things like Lyn was mentioning, things around household waste and, renewable energy or energy saving practices in households. That's the kind of information that we are interested in, but we're very much aware that we're going to hit a wall when it comes to GDPR, and we're going to have to generalize it anyway. So we're looking at it's still under discussion. As I mentioned, it's early days in the project, but we're looking at perhaps using a small areas, or breaking down these small areas even further to distinguish between different patterns of urbanization within Dundrum. So your residential neighborhoods versus your town versus your more commercial districts. But again, that's still under discussion. In terms of the question of data, how you validate and all that, as I mentioned, we're first gonna look for existing data sources and see if the likes of CSO will engage in giving us the finer grain detail, because they have it. So that will be our starting point. Now, when we start to fill data gaps and start collecting the data ourselves, Shane is going to be doing a lot of that, coordinating a lot of that, and basically a lot of it will be based in online surveys and things like that. And through Lyn and the Dundrum 2030, we just hope that the answers will be, fair and not biased. But I suppose it's a risk that we always also run. There's another big issue when it comes to data, and is the fact that in some cases we're gonna have different scales of data. So you might have your household level data. When it comes to the likes of the air quality monitoring sensors that we're gonna be locating throughout Dundrum, that's real-time data. That's a lot of data on a daily basis. So again, we still don't have an answer for that, but we are very much aware that we're going to have to come up to terms onto how to aggregate the data, what is the level of aggregation, and how we generalize, and how we, I suppose, quality check some of that information. So I don't have an answer for you yet, but we are very much aware of those issues.
I think citizen science is a really interesting kind of area, and you mentioned a couple of initiatives there, the kind of the We Count and the Tree Amigo kind of approach, and I guess as well as the data, there's a massive benefit from an engagement perspective, I guess. So you'd be drawing on both of those
Yeah.
sides of the
I
process.
suppose in terms of the scale of the project as well, this is a pilot, so we're not going to have an answer for every single indicator and every single data set. I think what we're trying to do here, and this is what I was just trying to get at when I was saying the output is the dashboard, but we're going beyond that. It's about community engagement. It's about building the capacity in the community, relationships, networking, and raising awareness, engaging the people within the community more meaningfully around the sustainability initiatives that are going on and the ones that might come up in the future. So we have all those. I think the project has to be viewed in that sense, that within the next 12 to 16 months, what we might achieve is not going to be groundbreaking in terms of the data, in terms of but if we set the foundation and we deliver a platform that the community can then take forward and populate over the coming 10 years, because we're talking a 10-year process here. So that's what we want to get to, really.
Absolutely, no, that's fantastic. Does anyone else have any other questions they'd like to ask? I was curious if there are any other initiatives along these lines in other communities that you're aware of, which would also be kind of an interesting point of connection, either here or in other parts of the world.
I just got a message from Philip on a chat.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see it.
This will work very well for rural towns, so he wants to follow up with that. So we might have other.
There's a guy in Trinity called Vincent Gallagher, and he had an EPA project, and they weren't as quantitative as you guys, but and they weren't populating the indicators per se, but they were definitely doing kind of a dashboard with communities, you know what I mean, on SDGs, okay. But not as precise as this, or not as quantitative.
I think they were working with the wheel, was it? Is that project?
Yeah, with the wheel, yeah, sorry. So they were using the wheel communities, exactly, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I read something about that, actually, yeah. I must follow up on that, yeah. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I'll follow up on that. And thanks also for the suggestion of the story map. We might be able to produce something similar and see if the Ordnance Survey is willing to incorporate it in their site. But I had a good contact in the Ordnance Survey that she was in charge of preparing that site, and she's moved on. So if Paul, if you know of anybody else we could get in touch with, we very much appreciate any links. Thank you.
Yeah, that story map idea is a really nice one, actually. I think the Cultural Value of Coastlines project produced several story maps around Dublin Bay about kind of cultural significance of different parts of the bay. I can send you a link to that. I thought it was a really nice output of the project.
Yeah.
And it was also based on kind of mapping of people's interests through an engagement process. So.
It's a really good tool for dissemination, and yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess one of the big challenges in the SDG world is that kind of coordination and kind of overall coherence of the approach, recognizing that in addressing one of the targets, you may be doing things that are beneficial to progress towards others, or not. And I guess that's something that I think this kind of tool will be really valuable with to bring things into a visible interactive space. Is that something that you're particularly kind of thinking about in the way that you develop it, the kind of the linkages between goals, targets, and indicators?
Yeah, well, the dashboard will be very much based or focused on the indicators, because I suppose, or might be able to take it in a slightly different direction, but I'm also thinking of the limitations of the likes of ArcGIS Online, which is the platform that we're going to use to do this. So being able to link the various indicators to different SDGs, or how they contribute to various SDGs, might be better done through the story maps than the actual dashboard. We'll have to look into all that task.
Yeah.
there are limitations on the web interface in that why you can map. So you'll be turning on and off indicators and exploring them individually and being able then to capture a certain area and see how that area is performing over time for that given indicator. And obviously there'll be a link of that indicator feeds into this SDG and into that other SDG, but it might be, yeah, we'll have to look into that. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I think as I said again, we have to be in a way realistic about the expectations in that there's so many indicators, but there is only a bunch of those that are currently applicable or that link to the initiatives that the Drum 2030 are currently undertaking. So those indicators will narrow down to, from 231. I don't know, in my end up with 2030. I really don't know because we haven't had that discussion yet. It's too early to ascertain this. But again, that limited, it'll be a narrow vision of the whole picture, if you know what I mean. But the whole idea is that once you set the grounds for that, it will keep growing over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, brilliant. Really nice. Does anyone else have any comments or questions?
I've one more if you want.
Go ahead.
So myself and Enda Murphy are finishing up an EPA project where we do a kind of a taxonomy of these targets and indicators. But like the way they were done in the open working group is that some are what I call are kind of like outcomes that were done for they're kind of the lead indicators of the different UN agencies really, but they're kind of clear outcome things. And then you have, not in letters, but in alphabet numbers, they have MOIs, means of implementation, like they're like finance, technology, capacities, et cetera, And then in between in the open working group, and this is the difficult bit, because this is where a lot of the gray indicators are with the UN Statistical Commission, is what Taz there was talking about, the linkages, where they purposely wrote down targets in terms of linking a social, economic, or environmental issue or a governance issue. And that data is kind of missing across a lot of, because it's actually quite difficult data to say we want to actually mix, you want the 3 issues linked in one indicator, you know what I mean? Even though you could come up with stories why that's true with a lot of indicators, right? But I'm kind of wondering, one is to be aware that that sort of structure exists within each goal across the targets, like outcomes, linkages, and means of implementation. And then lastly, I think because it's bottom-up data and the way you create it, like you could try and encourage people to be thinking in terms of how they're linked. Do you know what I mean? In the way they're creating the data. So if the CSO is finding that problematic, or historically has been in silos, like an environmental, a social, economic silo, that maybe when you're doing this, what I call more community data, that you have an opportunity to have real measures of linkages. Do you know what I mean? So how in my economic activity am I incorporating a social or a environmental issue? Do you know what I mean? So now that's tricky. I know it's tricky, but so in one way you can reduce a lot of, as you said, you'll be reducing a lot of the targets and indicators into a smaller set, but just to be aware that when you're doing that to look out for how you'd get those linkages going, or how people report on linkages becomes quite interesting, because that's the missing data actually.
Yeah, thanks for that observation. Yeah, something to bear in mind. We're lucky in that Enda is part of the team, Paul. So.
Oh, good. So he'll be aware of this. Good.
Okay, great. I think we should wrap it up there to finish on time. So thanks again, Ainhoa and Lyn, for jointly presenting. It was nice that Alan and me commented how good it was to see a joint presentation, and I totally agree. And thanks very much for putting the project together. And I really look forward to seeing how it unfolds. I think it's really interesting and worthwhile initiative. So thank you.
Thank you, Taz, and thanks everyone again for attending.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good day.
And you.